Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the GeekStudioz podcast. Today we have a special guest. I will give him first round before you guys. Everybody knows you guys. So we
Oh,
got Patrick from LodgeCon. So how you doing, Patrick?
good, good. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh no, thank you for joining us. And as always, we have Ernest, who goes by different names today. He's Mr. Pusherman. We got Kevin, who's going by Mez today. These guys change their names all the time on the screen, so just you kind of have to roll with what they use. Um,
I'll see if I can change mine later.
so, Kevin, first off, tell us a little bit about LodgeCon. What is it? A little bit of information around it.
Sure. LodgeCon is a 2 day long board game geek seminar panel cosplay vendor hall convention. We started roughly 7 years ago, and we've progressed every year so far in size and geekiness. We're a family friendly event for the most part. Generically speaking, we're free to attend, as silly as that sounds. We have a vendor hall and a seminar and panel hall. Anybody can come in and shop. They don't have to pay to come in. Anybody can come in for free to attend the seminars and panels. That's all free. The only time you pay is when you go into the game hall and you want to play the board games or the organized play games like D&D Adventure League or Pathfinder and Starfinder or the Magic the Gathering tournament or the Age of Sigmar tournament that goes on every year at our convention. So we're anything I find geeky and entertaining, I squish it into the building.
Oh, nice.
Respectable.
So would you say this is a good place for people who is this more for experienced players or even for
Amateurs.
people? Yeah, amateurs. I would say noobs, right? But amateurs.
I would say both really can get some enjoyment out of it, but I would almost say for the new players, it's more beneficial for the new players. I know when I was a kid and I used to go to some of the larger conventions around, not that I'm going to name them or name drop anybody, but I would go to a couple of the larger conventions. And when I'd show up, I was lost. And it took me years to figure out how to navigate those larger gaming conventions. And we don't have that problem. We're not a massive game convention. We're not an Origins or Gen Con or anything like that where there's, 50,000 plus people attending these things. We're in the hundreds, but at the same time, we're small enough of an event to handhold people to get them to where they want to be. Nice. If somebody who's new into gaming wants to come and learn how to play a game, we can send them in the right direction, and we're going to take the time and point them in that area and shove them. And then at the same time, you have somebody who's more experienced and has been to Gen Con or Origins or PAX East or West, and they know how to navigate these cons. They're going to walk right in and go exactly where they want to go and have fun. They're going to know what to do.
Okay.
So,
nice. So the three of us, we've kind of gotten a little bit into D&D. The only problem is we don't know how to be a dungeon master, so we just kind of like roll with whatever it goes. It's like, all right, this is a 20. All right, I don't know what, like, it's a critical hit.
Yeah.
I could come up with a story. I just don't know the rules, so I'm like, I'm not a good dungeon master because it's a lot of books to read.
There's no such thing. Okay, let me rephrase that. There are bad dungeon masters out there. There really are. But especially when you're first just getting into the game and you're learning how to play, there's no such thing in that aspect as a bad GM. I've been playing these types of games since I was 13, and I'm 46 now, so more than a couple decades. And so, there's different things you learn as you progress. It's literally like the game. When you first start playing the game, you're level 1, you don't know anything. Your characters are weak sauce, but then as you progress and play and continue to play, by the time you get to my age, you can wing an entire adventure path and make it look good, but at the same time, not have anything behind your screen. So it's a learned art.
Yeah, we see. Maybe we could go. Maybe we could find somebody with a little bit more experience, because Ernest down here, he makes it his mission to YouTube different things of how to be he looks for videos how to be overpowered in Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, I don't know if you can do that. I
I've
don't
done my
know.
research. I definitely the most unique combinations that you can find is what I want to do. So I definitely go research a lot.
He's a power player or a role player, and the type of role where you're referring to the dice rolls, not the acting role.
Yeah.
That's what you're good at. That's your niche, which is fine. That's totally cool. There's all different types of players out there in the settings. There's role players, there's rule lawyers, there's noobs, there's pros, there's legends, and so on and so forth.
It's three noobs and a legend.
Hey, that would be an amazing title, by the way, for if we start this D&D series.
That'd be a good name.
The three noobs and the legend. Not bad.
I'm glad you guys are getting into role-playing games. That's pretty cool. Have you tried anything besides D&D, or is that the only thing you've done so far?
I tried. What was it? It's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's
a different concept.
What was it? It was.
Was it Pathfinder?
No, it wasn't Pathfinder. It
Savage
was...
Worlds.
Well, while you think about that,
yeah, I'll think about
it. Me personally, so I would say D&D is the only actual role-based playing board game that I do, but now online and multiplayer games, I do play a lot of role-based games. Like Final Fantasy is huge for me. That was that actually got me into my first open world multi-online player role-playing games.
Well, they're all related. They're all cousins of each other.
That Fable was a great role-based game.
Oh yeah.
Any decision-based game really started me into I can affect things based on my choices. So I don't have to just be a good guy. I can actually do what I want to do.
Yeah, D&D in theory, and a lot of people claim that D&D is the grandfather of all games, for at least the modern games. As far as video games, tabletop games, card games, a lot of people will say that D&D was the center point where it all started, and from there you get all the branches all the way up to, your multiplayer games online, to your solo games on PlayStation, to more relevant current video games and or tabletop games out in society. They all kind of trace their roots back to D&D, because essentially all D&D is, it's a computer game played with dice and paper and imagination. That's all it is. That's basically the dice rolling is the foundation of every video game that's out there for the most part. Other than some player skill with first-person shoot'ems, every video game out there can trace its roots back to D&D.
I was gonna say the closest I could get to being good at D&D is the Dungeons and Dragons board game. I was trying to grab it. It's right behind me, but it's under all these stuff. Let me try and grab it. I might make a mess. Hold on.
Well, why you do that? Dopey, have you ever played anything? Have you ever played anything other than?
No, I'm actually still frankly new to D&D. I've been wanting to get into it, but I haven't been with certain people who also want to get into it. So it's I always have it in the back of my head, but I haven't had people that with the same with the same mission be like, hey, you know what? Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
And that's how normally it goes. There's always people that kind of do want to start putting their foot in the pool, but then they want to back up, like, nah, it's gonna ruin my life. I'm gonna. I'm like, bro, it's a fucking game, G. It's like, come on, let's just have it. Let's give it a shot.
We can all agree that there's been one game that we've got so addicted to that we couldn't put it down. Final Fantasy was that game for me. I spend real life money on Final Fantasy. It happens.
Yeah. There is a game where I've spent a lot more money than I would like to say, and it's a mobile game. My girlfriend listens to this, so I only spent $500.
That's still a lot for
bro. But so here is the board game. So it's a Dungeons and Dragons board game.
Oh my lord! Let me see the back of that. Okay.
It's
Upside down.
upside down.
Upside down.
Other way. There you go.
I didn't put it right when I closed.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I've been playing D&D since the age of 13, and there's kind of a funny story behind it. I'm old enough to where when I was a kid growing up playing these games, there was this thing called a satanic panic. If you guys have ever heard of that before.
I remember.
Yeah,
Well, I remember hearing about it.
Yes, please explain that one a little more. It caught my interest. It caught my interest.
Well, back in it was like the mid to late 80s, I believe. It might have been in the early 80s. But anyhow, there was parent groups and media and everybody freaking out over D&D, the game, because they blamed it on some unfortunate incidences that happened to some kids when they were younger in the 80s. And so instead of saying, hey, these kids need help with, home life or, emotional stuff they were going through or whatever the case may be for those individual kids, they started blaming the outcome of their choices on the fact that, once or twice they play D&D. Oh, it's the devil game. And it's like, what the heck? That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Modern parents, you gotta love that.
It still happens to this day.
I know that's why. It's like they can't. They don't want to take responsibility, so it's like fuck it. You know what? It's that game's fault.
Basically, yeah. And so when I was a kid growing up, D&D, I just started getting into it. I was 13. I think I was in junior high or right around junior high. And a friend of mine, him and his older brothers played D&D. And he wanted to introduce me to the game because we were good friends. We lived near each other. And I was like, oh, sure. Okay, why not? Let's. Well, my mom, God bless her, being a typical parent from that age group, found out about that game. And I tried to explain to her that the premise behind the game is you're good defeating evil.
Right.
That's the whole premise. That's like the whole shtick of D&D for the most part. 99% of all games is your good guys beating the crap out of bad guys.
Yeah.
But there was still that stigmatism around the game that to a certain point I was getting so much flack from my mom that she didn't want me playing. And then so my buddy and his brothers also played a different game called Shadowrun. Now, is anybody familiar with Shadowrun?
I am not. Let me Google that.
Okay.
I've heard of it. I know I've heard of it at some point.
Well, the premise behind Shadowrun is you're criminals stealing, blowing stuff up and killing people.
Yeah, now that is my game. And let's get into that game, fellas. I want to be the bad guy.
And it's kind of very reminiscent of something along the lines of like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
That futuristic timeline. There's in the game itself, there's humans, there's dwarves, there's orcs, there's elves, but it's in the future. And you have robotics and cybernetics and magic, and it's all intermingling. And again, for Shadowrun, the premise of the game was you're bad guys, criminals, literally committing felonies and murders and thefts, and that was the premise behind the game. So as a kid growing up, my parents weren't comfortable with me playing D&D, but they were totally fine with me playing Shadowrun. I'm not kidding you, dude. I'd get home from my buddy's house, and my parents would be like, "What were you doing at Brian's?" And I was like, "Oh, we were just playing Shadowrun." And they're like, "Oh, okay." You weren't playing D&D. No, I wasn't playing D&D. I was playing Shadowrun. Totally different game.
I don't want you to be a knight in shining armor, but I want you to be a robber. I want you to kill these people. No. Knight in shining armor. No. Nothing, no questions. Not in this house.
And to be fair, the Shadowrun game is pretty fun and it's a pretty good game. But again, the night and day premises, night and day. Yeah. And then by the time I got to be about 16 or 17, somewhere in that ballpark, my parents had lost all control over me. I was already kind of on my own kind of a deal. And they were just like, just don't get in trouble. And I was like, okay. And now, even to this day, my parents are like, "You going to go play D&D? Tell the boys we said hi." It's like, okay, Mom.
No, I totally understand it. So I went through something similar, and I like telling the story, but it breaks my heart every time. So when I was younger, what's it called? My parents decided to take us back to Mexico. We lived in a bad area, so from there they're like, you know what? Let's get them out of that bad area. hopefully, like they'll be spared from, the crime area that's around there. So we went to Mexico, and we ended up going to a Catholic school. So the
Those are rough.
yeah, so the principal, or the priest, right? He called up all the nuns, which the nuns were the teachers. He's like, "Hey, I just confiscated something. What is this? Explain this to me." And it was the Pokemon cards. And from there,
Oh.
they're like, "You know what? I've read that this is satanic, and this is like, we can't have this. We need a meeting with all the parents." They called all the parents. They called my mom. My mom gets home. She's like, "Where's your Pokemon stuff?" I was like, "Oh, she's interested in Pokemon." Oh, I'm showing her all my Pokemon stuff. I'm showing her my like Dragon Ball stuff. She threw all of it away because she says that they told her that it was satanic. I was like, "It's not satanic. It's just they're digital monsters." They're like, "That's the devil." I was like, "Oh my god, it's not the devil." But I mean, what could I do? I was like 12 at the time, so
Yeah.
yeah. So now whenever there's a Charizard that goes for sale, the original cards, like I'll send it to her, and I'm like, "Oh, that could have been me."
Oh my god. Well, and that's the thing I never understood on the pure panic of everybody back in the day, and the simple fact that what I got out of playing those games, D&D and Shadowrun, and other games we played in my youth, is what I got out of it was, one, a better comprehension of math and English, because of all the dice rolling and the quick calculations and all the reading of the rule books. My education would not be what it is today if it wasn't for those games back in the day. Along with that, I've developed, I call them the guys. I've got this group of like 10 guys that we played games with our entire lives. So from like 16 to 15 to all the way to the one buddy of mine I met at 13. To this day, we're still playing games. It's been 30 years.
Yeah.
We did something right because we're all still friends. We all still see each other and hang out with each other. We all help each other if we need a hand with something. Mm-hmm. We formed our own little, for lack of a better word, cult around these games. And in fact, just a few months ago, the wife and I ended up moving a little further south than where we were a year ago, actually 2 years ago. We bought a house and moved in just this last November. So we're almost coming up to a year in the new house.
Okay.
So the other day, the wife gave me a honey-do list that was a mile long.
Not the honey-do list.
She's like, "Here, take the kids, go do this honey-do list." And, she said she had to work that day, and that, when I got home, I'd get home and she would be home later that night. And I said, "Okay, cool." So I grabbed my kids. It's called parenting. Yeah. Went to go do the honey-do list. And the way my property works is there's a pretty big line of trees on the west side of my property. So you don't see the driveway until you're right up on the house. Mm-hmm. So I come right up on the house expecting an empty driveway, and there's 10 cars in my driveway. And I'm like, "What the hell is going on here?" I was all confused. My kids are in the back seat laughing, and I don't know why they're laughing. And then all of a sudden, I see two of my buddies standing in the driveway, one of which was our forever GM, pulling his D&D box out of the trunk of his car. And he looks at me like, "Oh." I'm like, "What the hell's going on?" So my wife arranged with my buddies to throw a surprise D&D thing. We played D&D for like 13 hours that day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like,
"That's amazing."
Oh, yeah. Dude, my family and friends are awesome. But holy cow. And mostly she did that because we had a rough couple of years with COVID, and then we had a bunch of other stuff. Like we had a house fire. It's part of the reason why we bought a new house, and a bunch of other things. So I haven't been playing games in quite a while. So that was a huge gift that the wife put together for me and just surprised me with just this last August is when that happened. So, but it was just like, holy cow. So my wife was able to make 2 phone calls, and that clique or cult of 10 guys showed up, and we all played D&D for 13 hours, just, about 2 weeks worth of notice. So, and one of my guys lives now currently in Atlanta.
He came out. That is some planning. Yeah. So I have to ask, how did you go from 13-year-old, I'm gonna assume like playing in the dining room or a basement or a garage
Basement.
to I feel like it was a basement. But how did you go from playing a basement in D&D to running LodgeCon?
Okay, so we have that big group we talked about, right?
Yes.
So the last couple of years, we haven't been playing anywhere near the amount we used to play. You know, we all got busy. We started having kids, careers. People moved away out of state, and so we were playing fewer and fewer times throughout the year. But I still had, at the time, a lot of free available weekends, and I had the desire to play still. So what I started to do was I started organizing games at a local game store called the Dragon's Refuge down here in Bourbonnais in Kankakee County. And that's where we started playing organized play Pathfinder, which is similar to D&D Adventure League, where it's an organized living campaign where you go on adventures, you report the adventures, and it affects the outcome of the world. Pathfinder is the inheritor of D&D in many respects. And in fact, full disclosure, I am or was or at one point was a venture captain for Pathfinder Paizo, in particular, the Organized Play Foundation, which was their group of volunteers that would arrange games at different conventions or different game stores. So what I was doing in the beginning is organizing adventures at a local game store because I wanted to play. I wasn't a member of the organized play yet. I was just some guy who just got tired of not playing. So I started putting up posts at the local game store. Hey, come on down and play with me, which sounds horrible.
If you wouldn't have mentioned it, I wasn't going to say anything.
It was in the back of my mind, but you know, I was going to wait a few. Let's see if he caught himself. But, okay.
So we started. I started playing these games at the Refuge, and we started off real small. We had one table every like 3 or 4 weekends, like basically like once a month. I kind of have a weird, unique work schedule where it's really kind of mapped out for the entire year. I'm a fireman, so I have one day where I'm at work and then 2 days off. So every third Friday, I would organize games when I knew it was my day off at the game store. And again, we started off small, and then it grew. And then I started I went from one table to 4 tables every Friday, which was pretty insane for a little while. And I told myself when I started it, if we did this and it worked out well, I would do a game day at the store. I would rent out the store and I would promote it and I would push it and I would reach out to other local gaming communities and say, hey, we're doing this thing with Pathfinder. Come on down and check it out in these organized games. So I did that because we were kind of successful. We had some good numbers there. We're, like I was saying, we're doing 4 tables a night instead of 1. So we had, 25 to 30 some odd players on a Friday night playing Pathfinder across this game store. So I rented out the store and had the event. And we had over 50 people show up just to play Pathfinder over the course of the entire day.
That is a lot of people, like 50 people?
Yeah, I had 50 people. I had people from Chicago to Champaign show up to play at my game day.
That's a drive from Champaign, too.
It's a bit of a haul. It's a bit of a haul. From here, though, from Champaign, it's like an hour or so to get to Champaign from here.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm like in the middle between, so you got Champaign, Chicago, and I'm like right here.
Yeah.
So it's an hour or so from either Chicago or Champaign. So it was beneficial because we were out in the middle of nowhere, which made it fine because we were just as far from everywhere. So we had some advantage there. So the game day went over really well, and I nicknamed it LodgeCon because that's Lodge is a in-game term from Pathfinder. People in the community who weren't necessarily around our immediate area knew what lodge meant. It's basically like a union house, basically. So after the first event, it was very successful. And then I had a really big group of local players that wanted me to do it again the next year. And so I talked to the store owners, and they said, we would love to support you, but you can't do it here because we were already at max capacity this last year. So I started looking for different venues. And the Will County Fairgrounds in Peatone, Illinois is where we eventually landed. And I have some family connections there because my wife's whole family does a lot for the Will County Fairgrounds, and they helped us out. And they said, sure, come on down. So I rented out the fairgrounds for a weekend. So once I figured out I had all this space, I had to find a bunch of stuff to put in it. So we had some of the games, but I sought out other games. I sought out vendors. I sought out entertainment, and I keep cramming stuff in there. So our last show was in 2020. We had over 400 attendees. So
wow.
And that's a mix of gamers and people just coming in to shop and leave. So it's not like we had 400 people rolling dice.
I was about to say that would have been pretty impressive, though.
Yeah, it would.
I mean,
it's still impressive.
Yeah.
Getting 400 people through a door it's not an easy task.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine 400 people just rolling the die, like bang, like, holy shit!
And just imagine them all rolling at the same time.
Yeah,
it just sounds like thunder.
Have you guys been to Gen Con or Origins?
No,
I can't say.
No.
Oh God, you guys are missing out. That's some big. Start with a smaller con. And work your way up to Gen Con. Those larger conventions are pretty impressive.
So start off at LodgeCon. From there, just stick to LodgeCon. And eventually go to Gen.
Basically, there's levels to this shit, man. There's levels to this.
Well,
we're still noobs.
Well, here's the great thing. You can always do the smaller cons, work your way up to the big cons, but then still dip down to the little cons. Nothing saying you have to abandon them.
So,
of course. Yeah, remember where you came from.
So I'm so obviously I've been to different conventions, but for some reason I've always really enjoyed the smaller conventions. Like I've been to Wizard World back when it was Wizard World. Now it changed name.
It did, and that's the one I went to. It's something Expo.
It's a Fan Expo.
Yeah, it's Fan Expo.
Yeah, so it's Fan Expo. I've been to C2E2 usually like every year when it comes. Yeah. But for some I really enjoy going to the smaller ones because one, it's not as crowded. Two, it's not as overpriced.
I can give you 3 and 4. So for me, 3 and 4, 3 would be the entertainment. Like the people there, the vendors are a lot more easier to talk to versus they don't feel so entitled. For us, we've been doing this podcast for quite a few years, and whenever we go, we try to do a lot of interviews and things like that, and make different connections. And we always get more connections and networking at smaller cons than we do at bigger ones. Because I feel like when a person makes it to the bigger con, they're like, "Oh, you don't have any credentials? We don't need to talk to you. What can you do for me?"
Well, and they're missing out. They really are. I know some vendors that do go to some larger conventions, and they're there for a purpose. They're there to push their product, whether if it's stuff they make, stuff they buy and resell, whatever the case may be. When they're at those larger conventions, they're under a great deal of stress because it's not easy, one, to get into them, and two, it's not cheap. They're paying an arm and a leg to be there, so they want to sell. Yeah. The smaller the convention, usually the easier it is for vendors because it's not difficult to get in. And the smaller vendors or smaller events don't charge a ton of money to these vendors. So if they don't sell stuff for a couple hours, it's okay. They're not going to lose their shirt. Yeah. But I know some vendors who go to Gen Con as an example, and they're there to sell, period. End of statement. If you're not buying their stuff, you need to move along so somebody else can get up there and buy. And again, you can't blame them. Booth prices at those larger conventions are insane. I wouldn't be surprised if a booth spot at like an Origins or a Gen Con probably costs almost as much as my entire convention costs to run it. I mean, we are not that expensive. What we try to do though is we try and give the best show that we can for one
a reasonable
incredibly
reasonable price. Yeah
And in fact, one of the big things that we decided to do for this year is because with COVID we had to take last year off just like everybody else. But there are some of my vendors that lost their businesses because they didn't have those shows to go to right after another. There still are technically some vendors that just go from show to show to show to show to show, and that's their living. And if they can't make it to show because it was all canceled last year, there were some vendors of mine that have basically closed shop because they couldn't do it. They lost their shirt and they had to sell their business, for lack of a better word. So this year in particular, one of the things we did to help out those vendors that did survive the pandemic, we wanted to give them a little bit of a reward. And so what we did was we slashed our vendor price in half.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is.
Well, we were able to do that because I'm going out there just like a pit bull trying to find as many sponsors as humanly possible. That was a different business strategy than we had in years previous. Previous, we've always had sponsors, but we never hammered them or tried to hammer as many sponsors as we are this year. And then same thing with the attendees. Our last show was in 2020. We had over 200 attendees, had over 400 attendees in 2020. And this year we're trying to slash that price again in half for them because there hasn't been a whole lot of cons lately. They're only just starting to start back up this year. So last year, a 2-day game badge was $20. This year it's $10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we're going for the affordability package on the shoulders of our sponsors. And our sponsors are really stepping up and they're helping us out a ton. AdventureAweek.com. They're a publisher of a third-party D&D 5th edition campaign setting, Rise of the Drow. They're donating a bunch of stuff for us to raffle off the event. They've been a long-time sponsor of our show. They've sponsored us every year. We've looked for sponsors. The Dragon's Refuge, another great sponsor. Jody Gill, CPA, my tax accountant.
That's amazing.
Located in downtown Mantino, she's a sponsor. I mean, so we're really reaching for the different sponsors, and we're looking for different sponsors. In years past, we've tried to stick to more of the Geek or the comic for sponsors. This year, we're CPA. She's sponsored.
Yeah.
We're trying different things and looking for more sponsors as we go along.
So with that being said, what does it take to help sponsor LodgeCon? And are there different tiers of sponsorship?
Yes. Yeah. Basically, we have 3 tiers for sponsorship: $100 or below, $300 below, and $500 and then down. And each one of them comes with a different set of perks. And we try and be flexible. So, for example, like AdventureAweek.com provided us with equivalent products instead of the cash, that other sponsors gave us. So what we do is we take a look at that and take a look at the equivalency of the amount of product they're giving us compared to cash, and then we try and reciprocate as if it was cash. And then the sponsors get their names and logos on the back of the convention T-shirts. If I can turn around here.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
So, and then we do some advertising for them on our Facebook page, and our other social media pages. And we, they get free T-shirts depending upon the level, and free game passes depending upon the level. And a lot of the sponsors, at least a lot of the local sponsors, are just there to throw money at us and help out, because we do some things where we offer group rates or free discounts to organizations that are interested in attending, like the Boy Scouts and other organizations along those lines. We'll throw them a bone and be like, just get in, just come on.
Yeah, just get in.
So, and we're trying to work with the community in that way too. So,
Okay.
I was seeing that the 501 Legion is going to be there. Like, so we met them. we met a few of them in Joliet.
Yeah,
for the Star Wars Day.
Yeah, the 501st. The great group of guys. It turns out I didn't know this at the time, but I kind of mentioned it earlier that I was a fireman. Yeah. And one of our dispatchers through the dispatch center that responds and works with us, one of their dispatchers happens to be a member of the 501st.
Oh.
And I ran into him. He ran into me. We've kind of known each other for a few years because we talk on the radio quite a bit, but you never really meet him face to face. And then, so finally one day I met him, and he's in stormtrooper armor, and I'm like, So we started talking, and I told him about my little convention, and he's like, hey, is it cool if I bring some? I'm like, yes. Yes, whatever the question is, yes. So they came out in 2020. It was their first time with us, and they're part of the Midwest Garrison. And for your viewers who don't know, the 501st is a charitable organization that is worldwide, and it's volunteers that, in order to join the group, you have to have movie quality stormtrooper armor. It's got to be film ready. If it's not film ready, you don't get in the group. But once you're in the group, they do things like movie premieres, opening games at ballparks, and the big thing is visiting children's hospitals and raising the spirits of sick kids, which is it's awesome. I think their motto is "Bad guys doing good." I think is their motto. And then they also go to different conventions, like in Joliet, C2E2. What's the big Star Wars convention that is blanking on me all of a sudden?
Star Wars
Celebration. So they go. Obviously, they go to that one. But then at the same time, they do other things, and they found out about our convention, and they showed up, and they loved it. And in fact, their first year with us was in 2020. And before the show was over, they grabbed me, they pulled me aside, and they said, "Next year, we want to come back." I'm like, "Yes."
Of course. Let's go.
Why are you even asking? You know the answer. And then they looked at me and they said they wanted to do a panel too. And I'm like,
"Ooh,
on what?" I was totally for it, but I just was curious on what it would be. And they and I'm going to butcher this title because I haven't gotten the official title from them yet, but it's something along the lines of how to build an approvable cosplay costume to join the 501st.
Ooh.
Yeah, because they can't guarantee that it's going to approve.
Hi, Dad.
Hey, buddy. What are you doing? You gonna go upstairs? Yes. Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
This is my youngest.
How you doing?"
Go find Sis. Sis is supposed to be watching you. Remind me to thank her later. So their panel is going to be how to make an approvable costume to join the 501st. That's their first panel. Their second panel is going to be a surprise, and you're going to have to wait until I distribute that one. So they told me they wanted to do this in 2020. So then 2021 goes to hell in a handbasket. We all know what happened with that. But so then I wasn't even sure if I was going to do LodgeCon 2022 because it had been a year. Everybody had lost steam and everything they'd done. I'd lost vendors. Other conventions I knew folded. I just wasn't. We were never a moneymaker. We do this because I am a weird, sick person who likes to create extra work for himself. We don't make money off this. Any money we do make, we spend immediately with the vendors that are there at the show. So it's a lose-lose.
I mean, what's the whole point of having fun if you can't enjoy it with certain things that you love?
Exactly.
It's understandable.
I got to interject right there because I have to admit, Miguel is my right. He knows. When we first started going and we just started doing interviews, but when I joined GeekStudioz and started doing interviews, we were going to like toy cons and game cons, and I was just surprised at how much money that I was investing. I'm like, we're not supposed to be spending money here. We're coming here to work, and I'm like, everything that I'm working for is going right back into this. Like you cannot not leave a con with something. And the quality and the amazing people that you meet, you have to.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not just me. It's my wife who's a geek and my children who are geeks.
So I feel bad for your wallet. I feel bad for your wallet, my friend. You're definitely.
I can't retire now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I am a little jealous. Like, my girlfriend is not really a geek. She likes like witches and Harry Potter. That's as close as she'll get.
That's geeky.
But she won't play Dungeons and Dragons. She won't watch Lord of the Rings. None of that stuff.
Really?
So. Luckily, my kid is a geek, so that's what kind of helps me. And then obviously, I have these two guys.
A Harry Potter game, 5th edition. That's how you handle it.
Yeah.
So
just work your way up. All you gotta do is just fit it through the crack, and you got it right where you want it.
So I wasn't even sure if I was going to do LodgeCon this year, and many months ago, the lead point man for this area's 501st sent me a chat one day. He's like, "Hey, you got a minute to talk?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." So he calls me real quick, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he immediately cuts into, "So LodgeCon this year." I'm like, oh, I guess we're doing LodgeCon this year. Okay. To be fair, I was kind of like on the fence. I was like, I don't know, should I not? Maybe I'll wait another year. But then the likelihood if I would have waited, it would have been horrible. So, they basically called me up and said, LodgeCon this year, we're going to do this. And I said, oh, okay. So that as soon as I got that phone call, I looked at the wife and I was like, we're doing LodgeCon this year. And she's just like, okay. So
that is cool though. I'm not gonna lie, that is cool because I'm going over the featured guests and vendors.
Yes,
that's where I'm getting the names right.
Gotcha.
So we got Robert Neil Geiger.
Yes. This is where it's going to sound funny. I have a surprisingly large amount of friends or acquaintances I grew up with who are in interesting geeky situations that I dragged into the convention. He was a guy I went to high school with who's a self-published author. He's put out 3. He's working on his 4th book now. He goes to Gen Con every year to promote it. It's very geeky books that he's putting out, but he's been working on these books for years. And he's, again, a friend of mine who I've known for many years. And I just, hey, you want to come hawk your book? He's like, yeah, come, sure. So we stick him in the vendor area and he sells his books, excuse me. So, and then another friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, lives in the city of Chicago. He's a movie critic. And so he comes down and does panels about geek movies at our convention. Comes down for a Saturday or comes down for a Sunday or whatever, because it's been different years. And he comes down, and the last one I remember he did was State of the Union. It was the State of the Union of geek movies, or the State of the Union Marvel movies, and it was right before, I think it was Infinity War.
Oh, that was
so it was him and 2 other, because he brought 2 buddies, 2 other movie critics from Chicago, 3 of them all together came down and had a panel about the Marvel MCU universe and the greater implications and how the movies are all obviously being pushed out cinematically, the qualities, the hot parts of the cinematography, the costuming, the full spectrum of an actual critical review of these movies. And it was amazing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then we've had Illinois Storm Chasers. I don't know if they're going to be back this year. They've been one of our regulars for many years now, but they usually come in and do a panel on severe weather, things like that. Because it's kind of geeky if you think about Tornado. That was a great
It was a great,
actually very underrated.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost wanted to chase tornadoes after watching that movie.
Right?
Like I thought about it.
Hey,
there was a brief moment in my life I wanted to become a meteorologist. A brief moment.
See, there's a difference between being a meteorologist and actually trying to chase a goddamn tornado.
I feel like it was all in the same category.
I'd be in the studio. Your weather this week.
Exactly. I'm safe here. I'm not an adrenaline junkie like that.
But I am. Which is why when we go to D, why do you think when I go to DD and we play all these games, I'm looking up all of these combinations and tactics because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I want to be the battle junkie. I want to fly from the sky. And I want, the 1,000 person rail canning. Like I want to do things like that.
see what I mean? How can I be a dungeon master when I don't even know what that means?
You wing it. You just say, "Oh yeah, of course."
Roll the dice. Just roll the dice.
Let's see what you get.
That's why there's that screen. You're supposed to have a screen. You don't have to have anything back there. You just have to have a screen. And then just pick up the dice and drop it and be like, "Nah, it didn't work, man."
It was a 2.
Sit your overpower down. Sit your overpower ass down.
Oh man. But so I am seeing that there's other games that people can play. So there's Dungeons and Dragons, Hero Quest, Pathfinder, Starfinder, and Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, there's a Magic the Gathering tournament that's being put together, and I should hopefully have something on that soon to post on our Facebook page. But that's going to be a charity tournament to raise money for Special Olympics, the Torch Run.
Nice.
So there's a lot of conventions and events happened around this area, and a lot of them folded or had difficulties. And in fact, this, along with one or two others, are kind of being sucked into LodgeCon. The cosplay and another aspect are kind of being brought into the convention to try and give them a forever home. We're going to do this convention this time of year, moving forward for the rest of God knows whenever. And we're trying to provide them space and opportunity to hold their convention and a large enough, or to hold their tournament, that is, in a large enough space so that way they have the opportunity to raise the money for the charities that they want to work with. So, and he's a great guy, Al, who's putting that together. Hopefully I'll get something soon and we'll be able to post that up. And another one of those conventions that kind of fell down during COVID was, it was known as Kankakee Cosplay Chaos. It was K2C or C2, but now they're just Cosplay Chaos. They've lost the letter. I mean, COVID took them out. But they're a cosplay convention that is, again, one of those things that's kind of being brought into our convention. And we're giving them space and opportunity, and they're going to be holding a cosplay convention during LodgeCon. So we were fortunate enough to have a strange business model where we weren't making money, but we weren't losing money. And other than just the work, myself and a few others put into it, there's really no cost to us to do this. While some of these other conventions, we're literally trying to live year to year to year on their previous years. And when COVID hit, it took a lot of the steam and took a lot of the legs out from these smaller conventions. So
yeah, it did. I think that's one of the things that COVID did that maybe not a lot of people talk about is it did knock out a lot of the small mom and pop shops, people that had business, so like it did kind of hurt them. I know around here there's a convention that's usually pops up once a month. It's maybe I want to say 20 minutes away from my house. It's called ToyCon. And what's it called? So I know I've talked to the organizers there, and they tell me the same thing. Like there's a few vendors that had to, stop. Yeah. And I was like, man, that's crazy. Like it is crazy. And what I find funny is how a lot of these convention organizers, like you guys know each other and you guys are like get along, and like I always thought it was rivalry, right? Where it was like, no, my convention is better than yours, right? But it's not. I would go to one in Midlothian. I would see the guys from ToyCon. I was like, what are you doing here? They're like, well, what are you doing here?
Well, to steal a quote, a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah,
it's just that simple. If our convention does good, it's going to help the next convention down the road, and vice versa. It's not a competitive atmosphere amongst the different conventions. There's a certain flat level amount of respect to where you try not to step on your neighbor's toes. You don't try and poach their weekend. You don't try and poach their vendors in the sense that you would steal them away permanently from an event. But like one of the things I do as an organizer is when I go to conventions, and I go to a lot of them for two reasons. One, I do what's called vendor shopping. I go to a convention. If I see a vendor that's motivated, energetic, outgoing, has a product or item that I find appealing or interesting, I try to invite them to our show. The other thing I do while I'm at these other conventions is I introduce myself to the organizers, and I get a quick rundown of their convention because I want to know what they had success with and what they didn't have success with.
Right.
And we cherry pick from each other great ideas. And in fact, it happened to me 3 years ago. All of a sudden, these two gentlemen came out of nowhere, and they're like, "Hey, are you the organizer of LodgeCon?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm right in the middle of the show." I'm like, "Yeah, what do you need?" And they were organizers for a different convention, and they wanted to know if I had 5 minutes to spare to give them an opportunity to pick my brain. And I said, "Hell yeah, let's sit down." And we talked for a good 35, 40 minutes, just trying to give them the do's and don'ts, some of the bigger lessons, like one, have insurance.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah, one, insurance. You don't have insurance, don't do anything.
Yeah.
And two, have a venue big enough for the event that you're trying to do. And rule three, promote. And unfortunately, that con lasted 2 years, and that was one of those that was taken out,
Mhm.
unfortunately. Nice group of guys. They had a great idea. They had a populous area because they were right out of Joliet, but they just didn't make the year.
Mm,
You know.
yeah.
But I mean, so the convention organizers, for the most part, are pretty respectful of each other. When you set your weekends or your event dates, you look around, and if there's no other convention within like 100-mile radius, you're pretty much okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's my rule of thumb. There's nobody else going on for 100 miles, I'm good. You know, that kind of a deal. But you know, it's just I don't know. From my experience, it's been pretty welcoming between the organizers.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. That's pretty cool. Like I know we went to a convention. It was here in the Chicago area, and what's it called? It was their first time they did a convention. It was pretty cool. They wanted to do nothing but comic book artists. Like
Yeah.
no actors, no nothing, just comic
Yep.
book artists, especially local and indie ones. We met a lot of good artists
Mhm.
that we still keep in touch with.
Yeah.
And there was another podcast there, right? And the organizers like, hey, there's another podcast there. I don't know if you guys want to do a cross episode, whatever you guys want to do, I'll introduce you. I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Like, I introduced myself, and like it was just the complete opposite. He was like, oh, so where are you gonna be? Because I have this whole area, and I'm like, well, I mean, we're just walking around, you know, like we don't have an area. I you know, he did ask if I wanted to like set up a spot. I was like, no, you know, we're fine. We brought everything. We could do everything mobile. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
fine. We're just here for interviews. We'll plug them into an episode or put them on YouTube or something. And he's like, oh, so I'm gonna be here at this time. That way you're not around me. And I'm like, all right, whatever. You know, I'm like, yeah. I was like, okay. And afterwards, the organizer did tell me, he's like, hey, you know, like I talked to a lot of the comic book creators, and like they had really good things to say about you guys. He's like, for some reason they weren't huge fans of this other guy. Like he's like, I thought he was a good guy, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't want to say anything bad. I was like, oh, he seemed fine to me, you know. But no, he wasn't. now I can say he wasn't.
That just sounds like a rotten apple. I'm just going to throw it out there. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
No, we one of the local podcast, well, not really so much local, but the Geek Awakens podcast is pretty much like our right-hand guys. They've been around since year 2. They're a podcast group out of Springfield, Illinois. They come up every weekend for the last 5-6 years now. Wonderful group. And they're kind of geek-centric around either comics and movies is what their podcast and basically media in general. And they have a monthly show that they do, and they've been around for a number of years. And they're probably the easiest going people ever. So if you guys make it down to LodgeCon, I'll introduce you to them,
We'll be
and
there.
they'll love chatting with you guys. They love talking to everybody.
We'll definitely be there.
Oh, we will be at LodgeCon this year.
Nice.
So, when was the very first LodgeCon ever?
Oh,
Out.
God. That was that. I'd like to claim that very first one at the game store, and that was 7 years ago. So what would that be?
Wow.
2016?
2015?
15, somewhere in there.
2015. Oh,
All
okay.
I'm
think
old.
it's
I
been
don't
around
have
for a while
dates.
then.
Yeah, like I said, we've been around. This is our 7th year, but only our 6th event because again,
because
last
of
year.
COVID. Yeah.
But yeah, so and then trying to think what else would be kind of interesting.
Well, before we get to that, I do have one question that will follow up
Sure.
with that. So the last con I attended asked this wonderful, mind-blowing question, and I found a way to incorporate this in every single podcast since I first heard it. So
he does.
over the over the 7 years of you running LodgeCon, what is the one experience that you would love to relive in that 7 years?
Ooh. That's a good one.
Right? Yeah. When he first asked me that, I was like, "Why are you asking me?"
All right, it wasn't even at my convention. I was at another convention doing my vendor shopping, and I wasn't even in like LodgeCon apparel, and somebody walked up to me and said, "Hey, you're the LodgeCon guy, right?"
Oh.
I mean, that was pretty cool. I mean, just the simple fact that I was walking around And I want to say it was a vendor. He's like, "Hey, you're a LodgeCon guy, right?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." Yeah, which was kind of fun. But the best that's a tricky one. When my wife got on board fully with LodgeCon, I would say that would probably be one of the top one right there. Like the first year or two, she kept giving me a side eye, like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And then like the year 3, she's like, "I don't know if I want to do this." And then year 4, she was like, "We're doing this." So yeah, so I year 4 is that was it when the wife was fully on board and she was dictating stuff to me, and I'm like, "Yes, dear."
At year 4, it was no longer yours, it was ours.
Correct. Yeah. I like to point out to her that I'm the chief executive officer, and she likes to point out she's the chief financial officer. So it's like, yes, dear. Yes. So
where does the power reside?
With the purse. That's what we have an equal relationship. I earn it, she spends it. It goes there.
It couldn't get any more equal than that. It couldn't get more equal than that.
No. I'm waiting for the shoe.
You know it's gonna come flying around the corner.
She'll wait until I'm off the podcast. She doesn't want witnesses. She's smarter than that. Always marry up, gentlemen. That's my only advice. Always marry up. I did that. She figured out too late, and now we're stuck with 2 kids and 20 years of marriage. She can't leave now.
I love the fact that you keep looking around the corner.
Yeah, like you said, he's waiting for that flying chakra, bro.
I'm telling you, I just saw her come down like 5 minutes ago in a peripheral vision. But yeah, no, LodgeCon it's been a labor of love. It's worked out pretty nicely for a lot of things. I've made some really good friends. I met some vendors that have become friends that come to my show every year regardless. I had vendors that would have came last year if I would have held the show, which it sounds crazy, but they would have. I've made some fun game time at the events. I've learned a lot about project managing, budgeting, promotions, networking. I've learned a lot of those things over the last couple of years, and it's worked out pretty well, and it's served the convention pretty well. Like I said, our first year we had 50, and our last event we had over 400. So every year we've kind of ratcheted up the number in attendees. So I'm a little nervous, I will say, that with this year, because we had a year off, and I know some of our vendors and some of our attendees aren't coming back. So we're reaching out there, trying to reach out to more groups, more gamers, more vendors to try and fill those voids of those individuals we know aren't coming back. So I don't know what our general attendance is going to be this year. I'm hoping for good numbers, praying for good numbers, but you get what you get.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Like, no, I have a feeling it'll be good numbers. I think that definitely what's it called, because of COVID, a lot of people have been locked inside and they kind of want to go out and do something. So
yes,
I do know that that's one thing that's happening. So that will probably give you, who knows, you might get over 400 people this year.
I would like to see that. As long as we're growing, we're good. It's when you stop growing that you have issues. I got you. And to be fair, if we're a little low this year, I'll take it because of what happened. But from this year forward, we're going to continue that growth.
So
we'll rent a bus. We'll rent a bus and start busing people over there from Chicago.
I would appreciate that.
So with the return of LodgeCon coming back this year, what would be one thing that you wish your attendees will leave with? Like, let's say first timers or returnees that are, like what will be the one thing that you hope that they will leave with, like a great memory or just something from your perspective?
One, the overall impression that you can get knocked down and get back up. That being an impression. Yeah, we can get kicked down. Let's get right back up as soon as you get kicked down. Okay. I tell my kids that all the time. You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to fall. You're not allowed to stay down. Get up.
Right.
So, and then generically speaking, we got Dan the Bard.
I did see that.
Wait, so let's just hop on that. So before this podcast, I was sitting. Of course, I was doing a little bit of research about LodgeCon. I sent them countless videos that was posted. I'm like, this guy, Dan the Bard. I'm like, I gotta meet him.
Oh yeah, he's coming Saturday. Dan the Bard. First off, he's a real nice guy, real nice gentleman, super cool guy. But his shtick is awesome. You know, dresses up as a minstrel, sings funny songs about D&D. It's just hilarious. So I'm hoping everybody gets a chance to check him out. I hope they enjoy the games. I hope they find a game that they like and they have fun playing it. Or I hope they find a new game they never knew existed. I hope they find an old game that they haven't played in forever. I just want people to come in and enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do have one question. Which we could see if there's any other questions after this one, just because it's already an hour and I don't want to take too much of your time.
Oh wow.
But what's it called? Right. So I feel like the geek culture is starting to be very popular, and it's starting to be kind of like the new fashion statement, almost, right? Like,
Yeah.
So, for example, for you that you grew up where being a geek, it wasn't as glorified as it is now. Like when we were growing up,
Oh my God.
we couldn't watch anime, we couldn't read comic books because you get made fun of, different things like that.
Basically, hiding in the closet.
Oh yeah, dude. No,
Yeah.
my lord. Yeah. No. Nobody in my high school openly talked about playing D&D. Nobody. That group of 10 of us.
Mm.
We didn't tell anybody.
Yeah. No.
You didn't even talk D&D anything near the school. I grew up in a small town out in the middle of rural nowhere, and you had people beat up for wearing glasses.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about, I played D&D this weekend. No, that never happened. And especially the age that I grew up in like the late 80s, early 90s. Oh, my Lord, no. Oh, and then now, like you were saying, the popularity of all this stuff is, I'm going to say it's heartwarming, because when I was a kid, those were my favorite things, and I couldn't share them with the general public. I couldn't just look at something and be like, oh, I crit on that. I can say that now, and somebody's going to know. Even if they don't play, they're going to know a crit means you did something really good.
Yeah.
Right? If I was a kid and said that, they're going to look at me and send me to get mental health. Right? So the fact that it's kind of come out into the lexicon of pop culture. I mean, you've got TV shows like Stranger Things, referencing D&D and the popularity of that show. You have all sorts of different podcasts, YouTube channels, Twitch channels. You have all this immersion and access into geek culture, including excellent TV shows, excellent comics, movies.
I will say one of the benefits of COVID is it started the decade of the geek, locking everybody inside, literally, because I would say even up to 2020, it was starting to come out, but it really got popularized, and like geek culture after 2020 has skyrocketed. It becomes so much more acceptable now than it was just in 2020.
Well, like in 2019, not 1919. In 2019, I noticed that shift was coming. That they accepted vernacular
coming out a
and
little more
culture, and like Big Bang Theory. They were playing D&D on Channel 2. That never would have happened when I was a kid. And the fact that that started in 2018, 2019, and then like you said, we had the beginning of geek culture, the nerd culture, where it just exploded because nobody else had anything to do but watch YouTube because we're stuck at home. And so look what happened. I mean, you got like the Matt Mercer, Critical Role.
Critical Role, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So many different podcasts and or just like informational YouTube channels about D&D and Pathfinder and gaming in general. I mean, it's insane. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It's great. Because like my kids are geeks. Now they can talk about geek stuff at school. So for me, it's awesome. I love it.
Oh, definitely.
The only con to me for me was my girlfriend tells me, she's like, like, why are you such a geek, right? And like, I'll show him, like, I'm like, did you know that? Because she's likes like that Joe. I can never pronounce his last name. Joe Manganiello.
Oh, Joe Manganiello.
Yeah. So I was like, well,
Yeah.
he's a geek. So is Henry Cavill. She's like, yeah, but you don't look like them. I was like,
Oh, ow.
I was like,
Man,
okay.
that would hurt me.
That's cold.
I'm so sorry.
I was like, okay.
Oh.
But yeah, so real quick before we end this,
before we end, I gotta jump in with at least one more question, because like you said, you've been playing D&D since you were 13. That, like you said, 30 plus years of experience. And for somebody who's just started, of course, I'm waiting for those moments of sheer awe and amazement. So what has been the most memorable campaign that you've ever played in?
So that group of 10, we've got that one forever GM. We had a campaign that we dubbed the House of Pain. That lasted, I'm going to butcher these numbers. It lasted over a decade.
Wow.
And when because we started it when we were in high school. And we went through at least 2 years of high school, 4 years of college. And then it kind of started tapering off to where we would do it like a couple times a year. And then we finally got up to 20th level. And this is back. We started the game in 2nd edition. we stopped it when 4th edition came out.
Wow.
So that'll tell you how long of a time span that was. But yeah, we eventually stopped doing it altogether. And then every other year we have a Christmas special. We bust out those characters and we play. But that was probably the longest one. We had the House of Pain, Worm Scourge, the Web and the Exiles.
I just want to know about that. That moment, that recollection of
we can't just call it the Exiles. It's Web and the Exiles, and that's because one guy kept going around with character telling every tavern and bar that he ran into. It wasn't the Exiles. It was Web and the Exiles. And then who am I forgetting? Oh, Storm Riders. Oh, my favorite one, Storm Riders. So yeah, we've had quite, and that was just all under one GM over a span of like high school to literally just in August we did a one shot where we all played bards. It was an entire bard party, and that was glorious. And that was like a 12, 13-hour run, I think, altogether when everything was said and done. And it's just great times. But more to the point, I think you are going to love playing the game, obviously, and then you're going to have a ton of memories. But I think you in particular, I think you're going to end up gravitating from 5th edition to 2nd edition. Because the way we've talked already a little bit, I've gotten a peek inside your head already. 5th edition is a very good game. 5th edition's a solid game. Pathfinder 2nd edition, in my humble opinion, is a better tactical game. And I think you, in particular, are going to be like, you're going to want that level of, everybody calls it crunch. You're going to want that level of crunch. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know you should.
So, let me see. All right. What will you recommend, for example, like me, a complete noob and really wants to get into it? What would be a good first game to recommend me to start off, just so I could get the motor running, start getting ready?
That's kind of I'm going to give you a trick answer. It's not a trick question, but I'm going to give you a trick answer. Any game is good if you got the right person running the game, period. That's okay. But D&D 5th edition is an excellent game for new people getting into role-playing games. It really is. It's probably the best entry-level game there is. It's easy to learn. It's easy to play. It's easy to figure out the rules. And there's no wrong way to play it. When you get to that point where you want a little bit more crunch, then you'll get tired of 5th edition and you'll want a different type of game. And there's a lot of different games out there. There's Savage Worlds, there's Pathfinder, Starfinder, D&D 5th edition. There's even older editions of D&D that might be more appealing to you, like a 3.5 or 3.0. There's Call of Cthulhu is a different type of game.
Oh.
No. That's not a long running game.
Never mind.
That's a short
Never
game.
mind then.
That's like 3 or 4 sessions and your character's dead and you got to start over. Shadowrun, where you're the bad guys, Robin.
Oh yeah. I definitely have that game in the back of my mind already. Yeah. Shadowrun.
Oh.
I mean, you said as soon as you get to be the bad guy. I mean, you had me sold with that.
And there's so many others out there that I'm blanking on at the moment. But basically, if you get somebody who can run a game and who can run it halfway decent, any game is good. But ideally, 5th edition for entry level is perfect. And then, people like to say that D&D is also like the gateway game, where you start with D&D, but then there's so many others. You find other things that that draw your attention, and you end up playing other games.
Yeah, no, yeah, but like we said, we are interested in starting to play a little bit more D&D, especially the right way to play D&D.
Right way.
So me and Ernest were both we're both in the IT field, and one time we got together, we were in this boot camp, and we created a kind of
we did create a
mini D&D game using Python. But so it was just a screen, right? It's a screen.
Yeah.
You
roll
the dice.
Oregon. It was like original Oregon, where it's a text-based game. I forgot about that. And it's like, all right, you go down this corridor. There's a goblin. What do you do?
So send me a copy. We'll talk.
We broke that game so many, trying to make it better. We kept breaking it, so we got it all the way from the beginning because we didn't know what we were doing. We're new to code.
Find that code.
Sometimes simpler is better.
Yeah,
it really is. It doesn't have to be an elaborate, over-the-top, techie, in-depth, multiple storyline game to be a fun game. It's not. It's not, and especially at the role-playing games, when you're sitting at the table with your friends, it's not even the mechanics of the game. Sure, you roll a crit and everybody's going to yell and scream. That's awesome, but it is about the story. And more so than even the story, it's about you and your friends sitting around the table having a good time.
Yeah.
And more importantly, that's it. If you and your friends are having a good time, you're doing it right, period. That's it. End of story. If you and your friends are sitting around the table and everybody's miserable and throwing pencils at you, figure it out. Something's wrong. But otherwise, like I said, I've been playing for 30 some odd years now. There's times where I didn't roll dice because I was like, oh yeah, you hit. That's amazing. Because it served the story, and it served the fact that my friends were at the table and they were accomplishing in-game awesome things. Star Wars, for example, is a role-playing game. There's several versions of it out right now. And we were playing a Star Wars version of D20 system a few years back, and my wife was playing a hacker, and we were playing during a particular period of time where there were battle droids around. And she hacked into the mainframe of a battleship, a droid control ship, to be fair. And she, after a long progressive series of rolls, and she ended up getting all control over the battle droids.
Roll for it.
And made them conga. And it's like, what the?
Oh.
All right, cool. I get it. That's cool. And again, it was complete legit. As far as because I'm a bit of a rules lawyer. I mean, it was legit. It was legit roles. It was legit situation, legit scenario. Her and her team. I left the back door wide open, and they walked through it, and I was like, oh, crap. So to this day, if you say conga line, she gets all excited and starts talking about the Metal Droid conga line.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
That is. I'm gonna keep that one in my back pocket when we go to LodgeCon.
It'd just be like Star Wars conga line. She'll start smiling. Oh my god!
Definitely.
Yeah, but I love her still. Looking for that shoe.
Okay, so for everybody, once again, that is LodgeCon. It will be on it'll start at November 5th at 7 a.m. and it will end on November 6th at 6 p.m., correct?
Correct.
So it is going to be from 7 a.m. up to midnight
For
the
the
first
game
day?
hall.
First day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then from the second day, it'll be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
7 a.m. to 6
7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay.
Yeah, and that's for the game hall.
That's
the
for
vendor
game.
hall is 9 to 5 or 10 to 5.
Okay.
We'll have to check official dates. They'll be posted.
And they could find all the information on Facebook, facebook.com/LodgeCon, or you could just search up LodgeCon, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. I checked, I triple checked, I made 100% sure. Like I looked up, I was like, let me make sure. That yes, that is the first thing that pops up, which is good, right? It's always great when you're the first one.
Yeah, well, when you get stuck with a unique name, it's surprising how once your name kind of gets out there, because I don't know too many conventions that start off Lodge.
Right? I think that's the first one
for me.
Yeah. That's either Geek or Game or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So
it's funny how we got our name. We couldn't think of anything, and then the guy that kind of did the website, he was like, "Why not just Geek Studios?" And I was like, "Oh, okay,
why not?
All right,
let's roll with it."
He's and we're like,
That'll
"It's
work.
taken." We're like, "It's taken. What are we gonna do?" He's like, but have you tried with a Z? I was like, "Wow." So that's how we got our name.
Bro, I think that's how my last name started too. Because I mean, if you spell out my name, it's Games. Basically, it's GAMEZ. But with a Z, It's not like, have you tried with a Z this time, motherfucker? I'm like, hey, my lineage, my bloodline. It's weird, but okay.
that's awesome.
Okay. All right. So, is there any other social media you would like to plug before we end this episode?
No, just thanks for having me on again. November 5th and 6th. General admission is free, and that gets you into the vendor hall. That gets you into the seminars and panels. And a game hall badge is $10 for the weekend.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So we're definitely going to be there. And for anybody that's listening, if you find Ernest at the convention,
I will pee in cosplay.
go tickle him.
wait, that's aggressive.
Challenge accepted.
tickle him.
Challenge accepted.
No, that's not happening.
He doesn't like getting tickled. That's why.
This is not happening.
But thank you so much for joining, and we will definitely be looking forward to going to LodgeCon on November 5th.
Definitely.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Man. You've been amazing.
We will see you guys next time.
Gang.